Thank you, Councillor Park. Seconded by Councillor Stewart. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Okay, item number 1 now, just from Mrs. Dean says we're live streaming today, so welcome to our audience out there worldwide, all around the country and all around the world, where all go. So just please remind the councillors to have their speakers switches on. Item 1, Mrs. Ariel King. Nice to see you here, Ariel.
It's nice to be here. Today we are going to receive here the submissions that you've received on the consultation document for the annual plan 2016-17. You received those submissions last week on the Tuesday. We also included the feedback that was received via social media or email. Those comments weren't considered as submissions, but we thought you might be interested in seeing them, so we included them for that purpose. The other thing that will happen is that we have deliberations on the 7th of June, so that will follow on from this process. So there's 2 resolutions there, just before we get into the detail. So the first is that the submissions be received. We usually receive late submissions, so I had intended that we would also have a need for the second resolution, but we haven't received any late submissions, so we don't need that resolution anymore, so to speak. Do we want to move those resolutions before we move into just some general discussion and then hearing the submitters? Is that okay?
Yeah. Just item, so number 1? Yeah, so we don't need to...
I think Tina's going to make a comment.
I think it might be best to receive those submissions once we've had the presentations.
Cool.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, just before we get into those, so you'll recall that we had our consultation document, which went out for consultation. That was out from the 4th of April to the 6th of May. In total, we've received 30 submissions, and of those, 6 submitters have chosen to present those in person to yourselves. I just wanted to take this opportunity to remind you that during hearings it's an opportunity to listen and ask questions and to refrain from making statements in regards to some positions that you may or may not hold on submissions at this point in time. You're here to hear with an open mind, and that is important so that each submitter is able to have that opportunity. So today, we have those 6 submitters. The hearing schedule is in front of you. We have the first person scheduled to speak at 9:15, but Mr. Thompson's already here, so I'm happy to hand over to Mr. Thompson now. It may mean that some of our submitters are a little bit later in coming along, so we'll just have to play that by ear. But was there any questions?
No, just the numbering of the pages, Ariel. So the page that the submission refers to is down the bottom right-hand side. Don't
Yes,
get
it is
confused
down
with
the
the
bottom.
top
That's right.
top
yes,
right-hand side. It's the bottom right-hand side.
Yes, that's
Yep.
right.
Okay, so
It is a test. You've got to keep you guys on your toes somehow.
Maths was never my strong point.
so everyone's okay with that? Okay, thanks, Ariel. And we'll go to submitter number 1 and page number 1, Mr. Bill Thompson. Good morning, Bill. Come on through and sit down and relax, Bill. This is a submission on behalf of Bill in London. Nice to see you here, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning to you and to the councillors.
You just want to pull this
Bill
around.
Thompson, and I'd like to thank you for the job you do on our behalf. And I hope to persuade you to change it slightly with this submission.
Bill, can you just pull the mic around a bit? Thanks.
Yeah, how's that?
That's cool.
Working? Thank you. Good. So, well, first of all, I should apologise, I guess. I'm aware of meeting procedure, and this submission is a rehash on the same subject, but a rehash of one I put in front of you last November, which is probably in your papers and you can discard. This is the one, just 2 sides. So I apologise for that. but a lack of procedure. It's about not rest home villages, motels and other commercial enterprises. It's separately usable or inhabitable portions of private homes, residences in other words. And my thinking after I that is I have trouble understanding why home-based SUIPs are singled out as opposed to B&Bs, any other form of private accommodation. As I said, we're excluding commercial stuff here, purpose-built commercial stuff. This is people using their own homes to make a little bit of extra money, and well, that's probably about it, but we do it ourselves. That's probably pretty obvious, and it's an enjoyable thing to do. And we meet a lot of interesting people. So there's a list near the top of my submission, the extra rates, that's the list of what they are. They're the same for everybody. As you see, they're just charges, they're not done on values of any kind. And the first two lines define in council terms what an SUIP will have, which is a separate sink, bench or cooking facilities, separate living, entrance and bathroom. And those, as you can see, they're just design features in a house. They are very normal, particularly in a place like Taupo with its sloping land. Possibly up to half the houses are built in 2 stories, but anyway, a good many of them. And it makes sense to have a bathroom, and often there's a bedroom downstairs, and the addition of a sink bench and an outside door, which would be normal. That qualifies as an SUIP. But what I can't fathom is how and why that design difference means that visitors staying there must use more of the council facilities, water, rubbish and sewage, than those that stay at the B&B next door, or the whole house up the road, which is let out as a casual holiday home, and doesn't attract an SUIP charge of any kind. And I make the point here, visitors anywhere, paying or otherwise, the family coming over from England and staying for a few weeks with mum and dad or their children, they all use these services each and every day, the sewage, water and refuse, and Taupo loves it. That's in large part what Taupo is about, is having visitors and taking money off them in the process. How bad is that? So, but there are 2 aspects to this. There's the extra charges and then there's the AGC, the UAGC. And I've really put my case for the charges, and then visitors, I mean, can it really be said that somebody staying in an SUIP, do they shower and use the toilet, and visitors in other homes around town don't? I mean, it's a rhetorical question, clearly. It's going to lead to some health problems if in fact that is what happens, but it doesn't. And similarly with rubbish, they generate the same amount of rubbish wherever they're staying. In my place in paying nicely to us, or in the neighbours next door with the family over from Australia for a couple of days. Same deal, they shower, they use the toilet, they throw rubbish out, preferably not out their car window. So SUIPs, to summarise, SUIP visitors make more use of these council facilities than any kind of visitors to any other home. And we're looking at an ongoing charge purely based on building design, and I can't find any other explanation. The AGC, well, I could quote from the own annual plan, but it's to fund such things as leadership, governance, advocacy, emergency management, animal control and cemeteries. And I suppose I could grant that sometimes late on a Saturday night some animal control might be needed for some of our visitors downtown and a few too many beers. But in fact, individual visitors, they don't impact on these governance and leadership functions, animal control, cemeteries. I guess if you've been one of the ones that apparently don't shower and don't go to the toilet for a few days, you may succumb to a lack of hygiene. Due to a lack of hygiene, you need a cemetery plot, but, you know, again, facetious is all that is. So it comes back to our policy here, the SUIP policy, and I'm summarising again here, but my thinking is policy is put in place as a solution to a particular situation or a perceived problem. The existence of a problem is the reason for a policy. There's probably one exception to that worldwide, and that's if your name's Donald Trump and you're running for president. He doesn't justify anything. But try as I might, I can't see a problem. It's peculiar to SUIPs here. So I'd like to make the point that Taupo thrives on it, but it's hosting visitors that creates the problem. It is not the type of building that they stay in. Wherever visitors choose to stay has no bearing on how often they shower or use the toilet, and their rubbish still has to be processed. and this is a little bit harsh, and please don't take it as a criticism, but it's an observation. This particular rate could almost be called dishonest, insofar as it charges some but not others, and all for apparently no reason at all. If anyone can actually offer me an explanation, I'd be very willing to listen to it and have my mind changed. But I've thought about this for some months off and on, and I can't see anywhere where I've missed the point when you start to pull it apart like I've tried to do here today. So thank you all for your time. I believe this policy is misconceived, and I believe it should be scrapped and recoup the lost income. You'll have to balance the books via the general rate. So thank you again.
Okay, thanks very much, Bill. Appreciate your time here today. Just before you go, sorry, there might be some questions from councillors. Any questions of Bill regarding this issue?
I would love to have some observations,
Yep, sure.
criticisms.
Councillor Harvey.
Can I just clarify, how much are you paying in rates, Bill?
Any of them pay this $1,375.76. It's
Your
a plus no, these are extra. And in our case, it's about 33%, but you know, that will vary depending on your base valuation, of course.
so your total rates bill is
Is
all something.
yeah, well, I guess about 6,000. It's about 4 times that figure. But you know, that's
And you have occasional paying guests.
yes, we've taken has been about 9 to 10,000 a year this last year, and I think it's New Zealand wide, another 30% on that, about $13,000 to $14,000 we take in, and we pay tax. A lot of it comes in cash. These guys run around with $800 in cash. If we do spend it, we make an adjustment in our books. Not everyone might do that, but that's the nature of society, isn't it? There's a lot of under-the-counter market. So I'm not against paying extra, but in my view, the Inland Revenue Department does that. They're pretty good at skimming off the cream, and you make a bit more, you pay a bit more. No problem there.
Concern is that you feel not everyone is paying the same.
Yes, but it's not that I want everyone else to be dragged into the net. I think the idea of targeting a particular sector of the home accommodation, the SUIPs, which is probably the smallest one. I mean, is there much difference whether they pay or whether they don't? There certainly isn't as far as council services goes. They all go to the toilet, whatever, they shower, whatever, and they, rip up their rubbish and throw it away. Whether they stay at one of your places, I'm sure you'll have friends and family to stay at times, and you didn't think of charging them, and you're not an SUIP necessarily. But they do have the same impact as our guests who pay and stay for a day to a week. So that's where I'm coming from. But no, I actually don't agree with, as I try to make the point, Taupo's all about having visitors, almost all about having visitors to its environs. And I'm not saying this discourages the visitors, but if you're going to put a tax on visitors, put it on every visitor that comes in. You're going to have toll gates on the roads. Probably more visitors come in, and I would guess I'd have to be right, coming in, don't stay at an SUIP, they stay with friends or a B&B, or they rent the holiday home up the road, the complete house, which doesn't have an SUIP, so doesn't get pinged for it, but there's still holiday people living large and spending up large in town. So, I'm not trying to drag in others into this. I know I've got a vested interest, my own one, but that's the only reason I am interested, I guess. I just think it's ill-conceived or misplaced. As I said, it's not a criticism, it's an observation. I'm not very good with words, so don't take it that I'm picking holes here. I just think it could be done better.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Councillor Bernhard.
Thank you, Bill, for that. Just for my benefit, can you clarify for me, please, are you against the UAGC charge altogether, or just a certain amount or portion of it?
The extra one, if it's a full charge, and I mean that's the obvious one. So what on earth has having visitors got to do with what a UAGC pays for? But this is an full extra UAGC. Now we pay one perfectly. I've got no problem paying rates. I know more than anyone else. But it's the extra that I'm on about. And the justification or the reasons, the thinking, if you like, behind why they're charged in this instance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Boddy.
In your bill, thank you for your submission. In your original one, you talked about the UAG at $250. It used to be $470 under land value. Where would you sit if this council, at some stage, probably in the next long-term plan, decided to considerably increase the uniform annual charge to say, like Gisborne, $690?
Yeah, and you restrict it, aren't you, to 30% or some such of, I don't know, the gross rate or something like that. Gross value, I'm not sure what it is. John, I'd have to get my head around that question and yeah, I'd have to do some homework before I had a sensible opinion. But we come from Taurua, as David's old hometown, and they have a fairly large UAGC down there. It never sort of bothered me one way or the other. I mean, it is what it is.
But effectively, through you, Mr. Chairman, you're concerned that these are additional charges put on you because our funding impact statement talks about the SUIPs. So it would impact on the amount of rates you would end up by paying.
You're talking about recovering the lost income if the SUIP, they'd only be scrapped, I'm thinking, on the residences, the residential, the home-based SUIPs. I gather from something that Mayor Ward sent to me just at the end of last week, that it covers rest home villages, all these sorts of things. They're SUIPs too. And I guess the figures didn't break it down, but I would guess that the residential SUIPs are just a small fraction of what you take in from these charges noted here. And I said I don't want to go down the track with the commercial guys. They can fight their own battles. You know, you have a 1.7 differential rate in town, and I'm in favour of that. You know, they get their GST and it comes off their tax. That comes to about 1.7. So if it can be justified, I've got no problem with it. And rates of all kind can be justified. You know, we've got to pay them. Councils have got to run. So I'm not anti-rates at all. I just don't see the sheer common sense behind paying one people for having one group for having visitors and not another of the same ilk. So I don't have enough homework done, John, to comment on the level of UAGC.
Councillor Jollins.
Through the chair, thank you, Bill, for your presentation this morning, and I'm sure you're a lot more gentle on us than Donald Trump probably is. Just a couple of questions to get a sense of scale from this. Typically, how many people generally reside in your home permanently?
Without the visitors, 2 of us.
2, okay. And you mentioned how much sort of revenue you get from your visitors, but how many extra people would that be during a typical year for you?
It's probably more like a 30% occupancy rate.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sort of figure we charge 130 a night for 2 people. We take in this year about 14,000, I think. Don't quote me, but yeah, that's the last 12 months. So something we have up to 6 people in it, but that's very extreme. It's normally 2, sometimes 3 with a child. So you're looking at about 100 days for an average of a bit over 2 people.
And just to clarify, your request is for council to have a look at these charges as regards residential homes, private residents.
Just those, nothing else. Just the home-based SUIP, which there are many. I mean, it's the old granny flat. You know, they date back a long, long time. These things. It's the old granny flat to bring your mother or your mother-in-law in, for the last few years.
And of the suite of extra charges that you've got there, is there one that you feel is more unequitable than others? I'm assuming that...
No, not really. I don't think any of them can be justified.
Any of them?
No.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Councillor Williamson.
through the chair, thank you, Bill. Obviously, you've made it clear that you don't see any apparent reason at all for the SUIP. And you used the word silence. I know you probably didn't mean that in the context, but you're probably suggesting it's sort of the unfairness of it, perhaps, and for example, not capturing everybody that perhaps would be subject to the SIP within the district, perhaps as well.
Be the wrong take on my submission, and it'll be my fault, not yours, John. But no, as I said before, I'm not trying to get other people into the net. I'm suggesting that home-based SUIPs should be just rated as a residence, just like the B&B up the road is, who takes just as many customers or guests as any SUIP. Plenty of B&Bs take 4, 5, 6 people.
I wasn't suggesting you were raising a point. I was sort of rose myself, just to, yeah.
Okay, just follow that up, if I may, through you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that's stated in our policy, if you remove the sink from the kitchen, it doesn't become an SUIP. To you, would that make any impact on your present situation?
No, when you talk to people, they say, well, block off the sink, get it inspected and unblock it again and just carry on business as usual. And it's an option that we're not going to take, but, it's no, I don't see why I should have to. This is, as I said, trying to make clear, it's a design feature in a house. I mean, I bet there's more than one of you who've got an SUIP, and I don't know whether you'll be paying rates or not. It's a fact. When you research the council database and go and look at a house, and I know of at least 2 that are SUIPs, no question about it, and they're not caught in this net. Now, I'm not trying to say go out and get them, although I did get a letter from Tony Wilkinson a while back offering to do just that, so if I provided names and addresses, I declined that with thanks. But no, it's not to get the ones who are not being caught at the moment, and some of them should be, if you like, according to council policy. I just treat us like any other B&B type operation. We don't even do the B out of the B&B, we just do the bird. And they've got a bottle of milk, that's all you get. So, you're out in the town. Once you come and stay with us, you're out in the town at the cafes and the bars and buying stuff. Thank you, John.
Can I just ask the officers, perhaps, at what stage does the sewer kick in? Is it when, say, when people go to alter the house or something like that? How do we find these clients that need to be charged these extra SUIPs?
Right, yeah, is this on? Yep. Primarily through building consent data. When, say, new house has been built, you see that. Other than that, the team does do a little bit of research on websites to see what has been offered in the marketplace. And we acknowledge they're absolutely correct. We would not be capturing everyone, but the team does their best.
Could I just then make the point? Recently, I approached officers of the council in regards of one property to be marketed by Harcourts that was paying this extra rate, but it was not self-contained because the bathroom facilities were part of the private house, and I believe that's been adjusted. So as we've had by the submitter been pointed out to us, there are inconsistencies in our policy, and that really needs to be looked at. So I appreciate your submission.
Thank you, John.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Bill. Good to see you, and we'll take this forward, and we'll be deliberating these in a couple of weeks, so we'll certainly be back in touch. But thank you, second time you've raised this, so we appreciate your listening. Yeah. Okay, thank you. All right, okay, what have we got next? 9:25, how are we going for time? Nikki Smith. Nikki here. Doesn't look like Nikki.
She's unwell, unfortunately, so I'm filling in for her.
Okay.
She tried to attend, but she's just had to disappear.
So we have.
So I'm Kathy Johnston.
Hello.
Age 28.
That's my age. Far away.
Okay, Kathy, good morning.
Good
Nice
morning.
to have you here this morning.
Thank
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, as you know, I'm representing the Taupo Sculpture Trust. I've been a trustee on the trust for as long as the trust has actually existed, so I was one of the inaugural members of it. And obviously, my passion is still lies within the trust. I'm really now having to follow on from what Nikki has said, so I'm just going to have to read, I'm afraid, because I haven't really come that prepared. Tourism is pushing forward as a key player in economic growth in Taupo, and with business prospering due to an increase in spending and a decrease in online shopping, people are wanting to enjoy a feel-good shopping experience in our town. Taupo District Council's commitment to improving the experience for locals and visitors is evident with the widening of the footpaths on Lake Terrace and the roundabout beautifications around town over the last 12 months. We believe our growing public art collection also enlivens our town and creates experiences that increase our attractiveness as a place to live and work and enhances our reputation as a fresh destination. Public art contributes to visitor experiences that are distinct and memorable. The Taupo District Council has displayed the value you place on what we are doing. We were delighted when the photo of Siren was on the cover of your 2014 annual plan, and recently we received a request for more of our sculpture walk brochures to go in mail-outs to new ratepayers. We're very proud of the 7 permanent sculptures that we have in Taupo, but have decided it's time to lift our game. We need to ensure that our collection of sculptures continues to grow. As a trust, it's our intention to seek fewer works, but raise the standard and level of the loan and permanent works from New Zealand's leading sculptors. This will indeed take more time and money, but as we now have a presence in the community and growing support, we believe now is the time to do so. Important sculptures of any scale will cost more than $100,000, and with the current public art funding at $25,000, it makes it extremely difficult for us to contemplate acquiring a major piece. Would you please support us by returning the public art budget back to $100K as it was in 2009? Thank you.
Fairly clear request there, and concise. Okay, any questions of Kathy from the councillors?
Just to raise a point. Thank you.
Councillor Boddy?
Thank you for that presentation. You've mentioned you're wanting it to go back from 25,000 to the 100,000. How successful are you in getting public donations? Now, the reason I raise that, I was in Tauranga recently and went and had a look at their Harry McCleary, which had 800,000 of public contribution. Last week I was in New Plymouth and went to the Len Lyle Centre with those huge panels which have names of members of the public on it. So what part does your trust pay in getting money other than money from this council?
I believe that the higher the level of sculpture you're looking for, it is easier actually to get the major corporates behind you. At the moment, our sculptors have been small fry in the whole realm of things, so it's actually quite hard to get major funders backing you when you actually haven't got a piece of major significance from a major sculptor. For example, when we were bequested $25,000 for the Graham Bennett sculpture, I mean, that ended up costing, well, let's just round it up to 50,000. It wasn't quite that amount of money, but so we were given 25 and we spent pretty much the 25 that council donate, dollar for dollar. But it's still sort of lost. Like, it's there, it's an amazing piece, don't get me wrong, and he's a sculptor of national acclaim. But I just feel like we need more presence. That is going to be great and we've got we've got Flip, and that's going to be absolutely fantastic for actually people understanding what we're doing, and I think get more momentum going, and I think that's already happening. Like, we're getting a lot more feel-good from people and getting letters to say what a fantastic town it is to visit because the sculptures are really, really interesting and they enhance the whole town. We haven't got an architectural paradise in this town, and I think perhaps we need something else that people can photograph and appreciate.
So just to answer the Councillor Boddy's question, you get 50% funding from private sources?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 50% funding and 50%, okay.
Yeah.
Then follow that with a supplementary question. The comments I get, art is in the eye of the beholder. Where does the trust sit in regards of more human sculptures, such as Harry McCleary, rather than the flips and the flashing things that a lot of people don't understand? Does the trust have a policy on that?
I think we've got quite a broad mind. If people have any ideas about things like a Harry McCleary style, we're totally and utterly open to it. But I think we've got a pretty diverse sculpture trust. So yes, we're open to anything. I think we're trying. That's the whole thing. We're actually trying to get more of a balance, I guess. And permanence is the aim, so that we've got something here forever. I mean, you go around the world and you see Henry Moores and, that's just a small example, but they're absolutely awe-inspiring. And Len Lai, we actually may have the possibility to get something like a Len Lai. We've actually been over to the Len Lai Centre and have spoken to a curator over there, and Mike Todd, an ex-trustee of the trust, is actually quite keen on maybe getting behind us and getting something like his too. So, yeah, art is in the eye of the beholder, and you might like something and I might hate it. So that's what Sculpt is all about. It's to actually arouse discussion, and I think that's a key player really in art. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Kathy? Councillor Johns.
Morning, Kathy. So I guess what the request is to look at additional funding so that this trust can get more momentum behind it to make some pitches for some more significant pieces of work. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Cool. And do you have any major, you mentioned Len Lai, have you got any other projects coming down the pipeline at all that you can talk to us about?
Well, we haven't really got our hopes up at this stage. I couldn't, a few months' time, if I knew we had more money, I could say this is what we want to get. So I wouldn't like to get too excited at this stage. But I mean, the world's at your oyster, really, when it comes to major works. There is possibly something in the pipeline that involves a local element, but it's quite pretty impressive.
But based on the current funding, it would be difficult to have
Almost,
a step change.
it's pretty much with 25 and 50,000 all up, you're ending up with quite a domestic work. Really, it's not. It's very difficult to get something that's actually resilient to public spaces. For less than 100,000, and that's it's a struggle. That's just I know it's a huge amount of money. It seems small fry, but if you actually work it out as to how many ratepayers there are in Taupo, I think it actually probably, I worked it out to be about at the moment it's $1 a person, 25. So something that's actually encouraging spending and for people to actually come and visit our town. I think it's actually, I personally think it's fantastic, and it enhances the whole feel of the area. But again, it's
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for your submission today, and could you just pass on our thanks to your Board of Trustees or the Sculpture Trust for all the good work you do, and we'll be deliberating and come back to you.
thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay, page number 42, submission number 27, Federated Farmers, New Zealand, Neil Heather. Morning, Neil.
Good morning.
The floor is yours, Neil.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Neil Heather, and I'm on the Rotorua Taupo Federated Farmers. I came through from Rotorua today to present this. I've been to quite a few of these over the years. The last few years I haven't done the presentation. But what I have noticed is that, the council seems to take out, when we support like the capital rating system and the transition, which we accepted a couple of years ago, and you very readily supported that, but the council doesn't seem to take into consideration any of our other concerns about how much the rural ratepayers, especially farmers, end up having to foot for this council. And if you're talking about a 2% rate rise, if you're talking about a 2% rate rise on $20,000 or $15,000, it's a lot more than a 2% rate rise on $2,500. So we do have concerns about not being listened to. The consultation document is brief at 3 pages, but it does not include rates for example properties, which we would prefer to see in there, so that especially the rural ratepayers would see what difference that would make to their rates. In 2015-16, the general rate for rural, which is with a differential of 1, was 0.02718 in the dollar of capital value. In 2016-17, this was increased to 0.0228195, which is an increase of about 2%. Rural ratepayers will experience a 2% increase in the single rating mechanisms. This information should be included in the consultation documents along with the changes to other rating mechanisms regardless of whether these increases were signalled in the long-term plan. Transition is over. In 2012, Taupo transitioned from using land value as a base for the general rate to capital value. Federated Farmers supported this change because capital value better reflects demand and is more equitable. Demand on the council services tends to be generated by more intensively developed properties rather than bare land. The capital rating value system is also a better way of recognising and valuing the assets held within a community and identifies the real growth of a community and is recognised on the council books. However, we have concerns about the transitional period resulting in a reduction of the UAGC, which was intended to reduce price shocks on residential properties. Now the capital value is being used, the uniform annual charge being used should be used at its fullest 30% extent, will actually reduce reliance on the general rate. So we strongly encourage the council to return to a higher UAGC level now that the transition period is complete. It is more preferable to ratepayers to pay a couple $100 towards a uniform annual charge than it is to pay thousands of dollars towards a general rate. In 2012, a single general rate was applied across the district with the idea that over time the general rate is then allocated on the basis of the benefits that different groups receive. Now that the transition period is over and rural differentials can be lowered to 0.8 because rural properties are currently paying a disproportionate amount towards the general rate compared to residential properties. So we recommend that the transitional period is concluded by reducing the rural differential to 0.8 and increasing the uniform annual charge close to 30% of total rate take. The uniform annual charge remains the same as last year at $250 per rating property. Federated Farmers strongly supports the use of the uniform annual charge and targeted rates and encourages councils to, where appropriate, increasing those charges to the maximum of 30% under local government legislation. 4 years ago, Federated Farmers accepted a reduction of the uniform annual charge as a means to smooth the impact on residential properties and the shift from land-based rating to capital-based rating. This transition period was noted as being completed in the 2015 to 2025 long-term plan. The uniform annual charge 4 years ago was 19% at $460 per property, and for 2014-15, the $250 per property charge equates to 15%. This would have decreased further, seen as the other rating mechanisms have increased, yet the uniform annual charge remains the same. This is far short of the maximum of 30% that is allowed. If the uniform annual charge remains at $250 over the life of the long-term plan, the percentage of the uniform annual charge 24-25 year will have fallen to a woeful 11.7%. Federated Farmers strongly encourages the council to make full use of this mechanism. The uniform annual charge is a fair way for councils to rate for services that provide an equal amount of benefit across ratepayer groups. So we recommend the council increases the uniform annual general charge per property up to the maximum of 30% within the term of this long-term plan to provide a more equitable funding stream for ratepayers, and also that the council better match the use or benefit of services with the charging mechanisms used and therefore the amount paid by households. This includes the economic development, community facilities and stormwater rates. Federated Farmers supports the use of differentials and considers that they provide a necessary recognition of the lower demand of services by rural ratepayers. We submit that the Taupo District Council uses differentials to their full advantage by having a lower differential for rural properties compared to residentials. The property examples in the funding impact statement show that a medium value farm will pay $12,650 towards the general rate alone. This is a colossal amount of money to have available to give to the council and would not be expected of a residential property, even though they receive the same levels of service from the activities listed above. This would be among the top operating expenses of a farm over and above many other business costs. We attach, which I take it you will have, the most recent MPI model farm for a central North Island Hill country sheep and beef farm, showing that the rates are a considerable expense compared to other farm operation costs. Compare the general rate that this farm pays with the high-value Taupo residential property at 745,000 CV, which will pay only 2,308 towards the general rate. The farm will pay 448% more than the residential property towards the exact same council services. A 2.295 million CV commercial property will only pay 11,659 towards the general rate, and this is with a differential of 1.8. A rural differential is desperately needed. So we recommend the council maintain a differential system for the general rate, and that the rural differential on a district-wide general rate be set at a lower 0.8 of the urban differential. We are pleased that the rural dog category remains at 25%. Now, I take it, I'm not reading anymore, they were the main points we are concerned about. I take it everyone's read our submissions, so I think you probably get the point.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for your submission. Councillor Park.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Nice to see you back here again. Just one question with Federated Farmers. What is your definition of rural, if there was to be a differential? I mean, you have a lot of lifestyle blocks, etc. So what would your definition of rural be?
Well, our differential of rural would be the big working farms, because that's who we represent. So you're probably looking at different councils set it at different rates, but probably about 100 hectares and over.
Great, thank you.
Any other? Councillor Christowski.
Yeah, thank you for that. You've listed 10 recommendations that you'd like us to implement. Can you please list the top 3 in their order of priority that would be useful to you?
The top 3. Okay, well, of course, the differential would be the main one. The UAGC, and I can leave you to pick the third one.
Thank you.
Because they're the ones that would have the biggest, those two are the ones that would have the biggest impact on the rural rates.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Neil? Councillor Boddy?
Thanks for the presentation. As an ex-Federated Farmers, I appreciate the work that you people do for the rural area. At the last submissions which your counterpart presented, I'll start off again. Have you had any dialogue with the Gisborne District Council that have the uniform annual rate up to the maximum?
Personally, I haven't. I was called in at the last minute to come and present this, so I didn't do that work. But I know where I'm from in Rotorua, the council, the uniform annual charge is significantly higher. It isn't up to the max, but we are certainly asking every council to move up to the max.
Thank you. We have a difficulty in the council here. We just had a presentation this morning in regards of additional accommodation or whatever in a particular property. Those people are paying a double the UAG at the moment, so if we increased it to your 30%, there would be a big impact on them. Last submission, I said to the persons that were here, at the moment, rural fires is funded from the general rate. Are you happy with that?
The rural fire, are you talking about? Yeah, I see that as changing. The rural fire service is going to be merging, and it's going to be one identity. So my understanding is that the councils won't be footing any bills when that is done for the rural fire service.
Could I then, Mr. Chairman, ask on page 1/48 or page 47, you read out in regards of comparing residential properties to rural. I noted that you quoted a commercial property at 2.295 million paying 11,659. You realise that a rural property of that same value on the differential of 1 would be paying 6,470, a considerable saving?
I haven't got those. Like I said, I was called in at the last minute to present this, so
The point I was making, that farming is a commercial venture, our commercial ratepayers pay a differential of 1.8, rural estate kept at 1.
you've got to understand that actually, I don't believe that yes, farming is a commercial venture. It is out away from the town. I don't believe they have a huge demand on the council services compared to in town. And we have the same problem in Rotorua as far as, that we are expected to promote tourism. We're expected to pick up all the tags of things that actually we don't totally benefit from, and I'm yet to see a council, and this one would be no different, that would actually promote farming within the area, but you expect us to promote tourism, and it's a separate business as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time today and appreciate your work. Okay, how are we going for time? Good. Okay, next one, page number 25, Topol Residents Group, Timothy Plummer. Submission number 16. Good morning, Mr. Plummer.
Mayor, councillors, thank you. I thought I was giving you the opportunity of not having to hear from me once again in submissions. I seem to be sitting here on a fairly annual basis, but Richard Hoadley was to have delivered this today, but he got called away for family matters last night, so unfortunately, otherwise you've got me. I just wish to start by saying that we appreciate the dialogue that TAG has with council and indeed with management, and the manner in which staff no doubt continually hassled by us, but on most occasions kindly answer and provide the information that we often ask for. I also just wish to make the point that TRG is very much alive, Taupo Residents Group, and active. Our committee is meeting on a regular basis. We have members, or as you know, we're a voluntary organisation, but we continue to have people who contact us. We're not out touting for members as such, and wish to join and become part of our database so they keep being informed as to what's happening, and we are getting more and more requests from both members and other people around the community on issues that they see are relevant and would like brought to, or certainly researched slightly and brought perhaps to the attention of council. So I guess that under our mission statement is very much the role that we continue to play. In Richard's submission was discussed and approved by our committee before he submitted it to you. And just briefly going through it, we acknowledge very much and appreciate that council have been able to look towards a decrease in the increase in the annual rate. And we are grateful of the work done by council to achieve this. Likewise, the importance of reviewing the fees, and we suggest that should be done. I know it's not easy within the 10-year plan parameters, but to review the fees and adjust them according to user pay principles, and we very much appreciate that. We have brought to your attention the Treasury management policy, and in looking at that, it's clear that there's a requirement for an annual review of that policy, and we'd just like to make the point as to, firstly, where are you at on reviewing that policy in terms of this coming financial year, and when is it to be done? and what degree of consulting and transparency in reviewing of that policy. One of the initiatives that TRG have taken is that we have now activated what we call a finance subcommittee, where we have asked for and been given some of your treasury documents and finances, so as we are able to look at those simply and primarily on a complementary base to ensure that the community, I guess, that we're looking after, are aware that council are keeping within the proposed 10-year plan parameters in terms of their finances, that the requirements within the Treasury Management Policy are being adhered to on the way through on your annual basis. And I guess what we're simply saying in this submission is that we appreciate the dialogue that we've already received from the Treasury Department of Council, that we will be coming back to you on some issues, not necessarily with pins to stick into you, but rather to discuss whys and wherefores and the reasons, and endeavour to get even greater transparency in that area. We raise in this submission the issue of the scope, and it's obviously relevant in light of the resignation of the current CEO, was the scope of the employment needs of a CEO, and the important aspect, as we see, is the relationship between the governance team and the management team, and where responsibilities lie, and that those definitions are clearly defined, and again, I keep using this word transparent, are seen and acknowledged and openly understood. We have been brought to our attention out of left field, interestingly, on a couple of occasions, issues where it has been felt that decisions have been made either by management or indeed by the governance team that haven't been adequately discussed, consulted. And I'm not quite sure what role we should be playing in this, but I say it's coming across our table, and I'm simply asking the question back of you: are you confident? Are you clear that the guidelines are clearly and clarified between what is the roles of each of the and each of the responsibilities? Just while I'm on the issue of CEO. Rob Williams has left you. It was publicly announced that he was leaving, but it would appear that he was left a little more hastily, that certainly me, probably being ignorant, have learnt about. And I acknowledge I haven't been in town and read each of the medias, but from what I understand, and I simply ask again, is there some rhyme or reason, and has there been any one-off or any agreement reached to facilitate his leaving in such a manner? And as I understand, has started a new job or is about to start a new job today. Finally, in Richard's submission, we just cover the issue of the water management, and I guess this is all ahead of us. In terms of the changes to the Resource Management Act and the responsibilities that is going to put on, or be requirements implied to councils and district councils. And I guess we're signalling that once again that prior to, once acts are passed and what have you, but once it's on your table, Mr. Mayor, that there is adequate consultation, that the relationship between the various parties and the rights to sit on committees or indeed on full councils are fully canvassed and rhymes and reasons fully discussed. It is a contentious issue, and I guess TRG are just signalling that it's ahead of us, and well, certainly we'd like to be involved, but I think it's most important the wider community is involved before decisions are made hastily. Currently it's an issue in the media, We see what has happened in New Plymouth. And it's interestingly that Masterton District Council have made decisions in the last week or so in terms of representation, and by chance I happen to be very friendly with one of their councillors who is absolutely irate that he himself, a councillor, was not informed of those decisions. So I'm just giving a little message there. But thank you. I present that submission and call for questions, and really, more than questions, ask that you take note of and may be able to answer some of the things that we have raised in that submission.
Great. Thank you very much, Timothy. Good to see you again. Any questions on Mr. Plummer? Councillor Krasowski.
Thank you for that, Timothy. Just to help me fully understand the point that you're trying to make on your first page under the CEO scope of employment needs to be carefully reviewed and to ensure there's adequate authority by the mayor and councillors. Exactly what do you mean by that adequate authority?
I'd hoped I'd explained that there is a clear differentiation between what is responsibility of governance and what is responsibility of CEO. But in the government's giving direction to management, that must clearly be known and be adequately publicised, a bad word, but so the community understands clearly where the demarcation lines are and what decisions are made at what levels, right down the chain. I mean, for example, a request came in recent days about some trees somewhere, and I haven't got my mind around it at all. But where is the responsibility of those trees, and was it clearly a responsibility of management, or had someone approached a councillor and the result of whatever might happen?
So you're referring to delegated authority and responsibility?
I'm talking to the clarification, clarity is the word, clarity of delegation, I guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Timothy. Have you seen the what we as a council require for what do you call it? For the new CEO that we're advertising for? Have you seen the advertisement?
I haven't seen the what's the word, not terms of reference, but
well, the document.
I understand you have advertised for a new CEO. I assume that it's in the hands of an independent party that has been employed to, in the first instance, seek people for the job, and no doubt they'll shortlist and council will then get involved. I assume that's the role that you would normally play. In terms of the detail, no, I have not seen what the specs are.
It's public knowledge. It's out on the website. So to do with employment of CEOs, it's worth reading.
Yes,
Councillor Williamson.
Thanks, Timothy. Thanks very much, Brad. Very good submission. Just for example, with your concern about the clarity of budgets and the financial statements being poor and not well understood by councillors, why do you say that? I mean, obviously you say that because you think that the statements are poor, or the clarity of budgets is not good, or because it's not articulated to us properly through the staff. I would have thought maybe it's the role of councillors to communicate with the councillors to negotiate, to communicate with the staff regarding if there's any queries. I know questions asked in the chamber obviously is only healthy. You know, that's why we're here, of course. I understand that. So,
I guess a little needle in this one. While we have complimented you on final sign-off on the 10-year plan, clearly the submissions that we gave at that time were not recognised too much, certainly around the issue of Treasury. We have continuing concerns that there is areas of responsibility that you as council have signed off giving to Treasury in terms of equity investment and, dare I say, dabbling in the markets, which in today's world it has to be questionable as to whether it's prudent or not for a local council to be doing so. I guess what we're saying in that statement really is the need to ensure that councillors are kept abreast with what is happening, fully briefed, and able to and confident to reassure their ratepayers that it's in their best interest to allow Treasury to continue to do. And I use the equity business as just one example.
Yeah, thanks. There's one other point just regarding water management. So we certainly support the submission there, your views on everybody has equal rights, irrespective of separate iwi participation agreements. Obviously, currently the council has about 7 arranged with iwi. You range from the forums to agreements to legislation, and obviously with our TDC submission, we do put forward our concern how that fitted in with our current arrangements, fitting with the iwi participation.
It's certainly acknowledged. Taupo does have well, is leading, I guess, in some ways, but already has special arrangements in relation to the lake and the lake bed, etc. Without recanvassing wider community, but certainly the importance of upholding the rights of equal voice and democracy in the community, we as a group see as important, and the voice of all the community should be heard, but whether privileges should be given and what to extent privileges should be given, I guess is what the debate's going to be all about.
Thank you.
Actually, just while Mr. Ward's here, what percentage of our portfolio or our investment portfolio is in equities at the moment?
Probably 1 or 2%.
1 or 2%.
Just to clarify that further, Mr. Ward, the investment in the share market is from the TEL fund, and there's an allocation is at 15% of that fund.
It's a range allocation that's available to the Treasury Management Group delegated from Council, of which about 1 to 2% is in equities. Yes.
Of the TEL fund or the total fund?
Of the TEL fund.
1% of the TEL fund.
Yeah. I said 1 to 2%.
Thank you.
That report is given to Council every month.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Plummer. Appreciate your time today, and good to see you again. All right. Moving on, Brian Nicol, who is 955. No, it's page number 67. Want to just check out the area? Okay, councillors, how are we going? Want a cup of tea, or are you okay? Keep going. One more. 10:05. Okay, so you can carry on with the TRG if you like, Mr. Ludbrook. Mr. Tony Ludbrook, page 24. Good morning.
Travis and
Tony.
Firstly, I don't know if the observant amongst you have seen that we look as though we have a uniform, Tim and I, with our
Just noticed.
coloured jerseys, but that's just purely fortuitous. Is this working? Yes.
Yep.
I would just like to start by saying that the work that Council has done has certainly been very appreciated, and I think in particular with regard to the keeping a cap on the rates increase and the increased reduction in debt, and can keep up the good work, please. That's very much appreciated by the ratepayers. You have my submission in front of you, but I want to just raise concerns that I have about the consultation process for the Waitahanui Water Scheme, which is what I'm going to discuss. The thing that comes through, if you look at the call for submissions, are twofold. One is a submission on the availability charge, and the other is rates and charges. And the most important part of what's going on with the Waitahanui water scheme is in fact the related to the capital contribution. And that has been set at I think 2,450 for every household that's going to join up with the scheme down there. And if all members of that community join up with it, then we're looking at just over $500,000. And what council have in place is that they want to shift the onus of the payment by Waitahanui onto the shoulders of the ratepayers, the ratepayers tied up with the Taupo water scheme. And this I think it came up in your consultation glossy flyer, which went out, and it has put down what you're expecting to take place, usually in some little balloon. So there are a whole lot of balloons there, and here we are, something so important that it hasn't actually been put up for submission. And I don't think that's appropriate. I think here we are dealing with 500,000 plus that you're wanting to put onto the ratepayers, the non-Waitahanui ratepayers, and it has not been put up for submission. If I could just read a document to you to refresh your memory here. This document's labelled the Waitahanui Water Supply, Attachment B, and the summary of this states an alternative proposal is to connect Waitahanui to the Taupo water scheme, with the cost for this project to be distributed across the Taupo scheme. This proposal would mean consultation is required across the Taupo scheme catchment, and there would be no capital cost to the Waitahanui community for connection. This ensures that the proposal becomes as affordable as can be possible. And I draw your attention to the proposal there. There's also at one of the council meetings, there is another document there which specifies consultation on that, as well as consultation on the availability charge. So I think at this point of time it seems inappropriate to be trying to make any moves on this. I think the community need to really decide, to be informed properly and to decide whether they feel happy with the 500,000 that they're going to shoulder for Waitahanui. Now, if I can, I'd like to go now to my submission, which is before you, and you have read that, no doubt. So I will just go through some of these points. Firstly, the majority of Waitahanui residents are not in favour of joining the scheme. And there have been repeated meetings, and they're not going to shift very readily. One of the reasons that is given is the reluctance of the householders because of the requirement to pay for the service. These payments are, firstly, the connection, or for the connection are the capital contribution that I mentioned, 2,450, plus the annual water rates. We haven't in that document taken into account anything such as the cost to those people of personally having to connect up to the Toby and run it into their house. And that's an additional cost. Now, I'm led to believe that many of the residents at the meetings with council have expressed not the belief, but the firm belief that the water was their right and they were not going to pay for it. And so this obviously has been the reason why council has turned around and looked at other measures. Now, the first of those was clearly to approach the funding authorities down in Wellington looking for another 500,000. Now that sort of looks as though that was the money that council were looking for to cover and subsidise the set-up fees that the or set-up charges that the householders are going to incur. I think that what does council plan to do here? We have before us the amendment regarding the availability charge, which we don't support, the TRG, but council are looking to have us as ratepayers and Taupo pay for the capital contribution. And then on top of that, there is the thing of the annual water charge of $470. Now, when you have a community that is firmly against paying anything for their water, you can be quite certain that there will be a huge default on this for those who join up. So is council planning again to have put out another submission for remission of those rates? Another point I'd make is that council cannot impose a water scheme on the Waitahanui community when they have expressed reluctance to join. I believe it is irresponsible use of ratepayers and taxpayers' money to put in a pipeline knowing that the take-up rate of this will be very limited. Other water areas throughout the Taupo district have been user pays. And to set up a water scheme for Waitahanui as a non-user pays, I believe sets a very dangerous precedent. First off the block will be 5 Mile Bay. They're going to be supplied on the same line. And council will have to be very aware of the problems here. If you're going to deliver water to Waitahanui gratis, and then you're going to expect 5 Mile Bay to pay all the set-up fees or set-up charges. Council obviously has taken a lot of note of the classification of Waitahanui under the Social Deprivation Index. And if council considers, and I would say I think we probably need to have more consultation on this, but if they consider that because of the social deprivation in that area, water should be supplied gratis to the householders, then I would argue very strongly that it is not the responsibility of the ratepayers to fund areas of social deprivation. Council needs to have a look or look for additional funding for the capital contribution, be it looking centrally or looking locally, but definitely not the ratepayers. if council is unable to obtain funding, it will need to pursue the other stated alternative, which is to upgrade the water purification of the 37 Waitahanui properties that are currently connected to the council's existing water supply. And I know that this is considered a costly exercise, but I don't believe you can put a costly line into Waitahanui with the current situation, knowing full well that the take-up rate is going to be very poor if there's any sense of money having to be paid for it. As I said, I believe that's irresponsible. With regard to the actual thing that was asked for submission, I'm not submitting on the fees and charges, but the original intent here, and I put it in my submission, was to submit on the rates remission for the proposed or for the amendment. For the general availability charge. Now, finally, TRG would recommend that any water reservoir, if water was going to be supplied to Waitahanui, should be on council land. And we would fully support the argument that you give about the uncertainties that would lie ahead if it was on any other, the other alternative. So that's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time. I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lodwick, nice to have you here this morning and your submission. Do we have any questions of Dr. Ludbrook? Councillor Park.
Thank you, Tony. Always a pleasure to hear from you. Just so, in TRG's opinion, basically it's a $3 million sort of project. Do you think it's irresponsible if we do it? Do you think it's also irresponsible of us to decline 1.9 million of central government funding?
Well, I think you're being influenced too much by this money, and you're making rather unwise decisions just to grab that money. And I think, council are going to regret this, because people in this area are not willing to have this disparity between who gets free water and who doesn't, and certainly not to prop up the free water.
Okay, so in the big picture of things, I haven't decided how I feel about this. I'm still open-minded about it, but so in the big picture, I mean, a $3 million project will cost the district $1 million in round numbers, and you think we should just let that go for the sake of maybe some unpaid rates?
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying, and I'd thought about this at length because I knew it was going to be one of the first questions. I really believe you need to consult with the community a bit more, those who are going to be expected to pay, and call for submissions. And then I think a bit more work has got to be done with discussing with the residents of Waitahanui who are so opposed to this, and very firmly opposed. But also you should be looking at an option of whether local funding could be of any benefit to that community. And I think that is an option that should be seriously pursued.
Councillor Harvey.
It is an interesting one, and like Councillor Park, I mean, we're also aware, and I don't know whether you are, that there are some areas down there that don't have suitable drinking water at all. Mm-hmm. So we do have a responsibility of some sort to supply that. So there is that catch-22 situation.
Yes.
And we have consulted several times with people down there.
With the same result, may I
Yes,
say? Yeah.
absolutely. However, like anything, people sell and move on. So what happens to the new people that are coming to the district all the time, and they may want the new water. And for those who, as I said, have no suitable alternative, what are we supposed to do with them?
Well, it's very easy, isn't it? To my way of thinking, you obtain the funding to subsidise the free water to an area of deprivation. And if it's not government who's going to do that, then, and they've knocked you back already, but, and it's interesting that they have, but there are other sources of funding. And there is
They've been explored, of course.
Yes, I know, but there is a very strong move for Te Mana o Te Wai, and you know, this should be looked at more seriously.
Dr. Luggerbrook, just
That
going
would
back to-
overcome the problem, because if those residents were then able to be subsidised, and it's justified to try and help them. I'm not saying we don't want to see that, but then you have a clear conscience to set up a line down there, and then of course that can be built on for 5 Mile Bay without the hassle of having to battle with 5 Mile Bay.
I mean, there is always, all sorts of change has some sort of battle, doesn't it?
Yes?
So that's what we have to deal with,
Mm.
weighing up the pros and cons. And when you count the number of households, because we've obviously looked at this in depth, do you battle those who are against it? Or do you try and weigh up the benefits for those who are going to come to the area in the future? That's what we have to weigh up.
And then I would go back to looking for additional funding, wouldn't I?
Absolutely.
And then that would solve council's problem.
Just going back to the submission document, what we went out to consult on, did you say that's not enough, or?
Yeah, I think an important issue like this, where 500,000 is, you know, going to be taken out of general rates or rates for people who are on the Taupo water, I think that this needs to be well advertised and submissions come in for that. And I don't believe that is anything more than just a glossy flyover that then says, we'd like to hear from you. Yet you then look a little bit further down on your website, these are the submissions. And they being, you know, as I said, the availability charge and fees and charges. And this is not mentioned at all. And it actually doesn't take too much to rather feel that that could have been put in as a little bit of a smokescreen to, you know, because everyone would just, could well think that this whole thing was going through.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah. Thank you for your submission. I was just wondering, when you've written it, have you also considered the firefighting potential that putting this?
Sorry, my hearing's not so good.
Sorry, I'll repeat that. In considering your submission, did you also consider the firefighting capacity that putting the line out there would provide for all those houses?
And what package was it?
Firefighting capacity?
Oh, yes, I'm aware of that, but the firefighting is, of course, already serviced.
This line would provide that service out there, would provide
Yes,
that
but
capacity.
the firefighting is also from the current supply.
No. Oh, well, no.
Is that
This
not
will
so?
provide that, yeah.
Councillor Williamson?
Yeah, through the chair. Thanks, Tony. I always enjoy listening to your voice of reason. Is that, yeah?
Sorry?
I always enjoy listening to your voice of reason. Obviously, obviously your reasoning is that Waitanui community totally oppose it if they had to pay, or if they had to pay to join the scheme. Because my recent information, what I've got here is that 84% of respondents actually would either connect or they agree with the actual project going ahead, which equates to, at this stage, 28% of people actually joining up to the scheme at about $5 per ratepayer right through the scheme. If 69%, I think if they uptake, would be no cost to the ratepayer at all through the community. Well, how do you feel about that? If that actually eventuated?
I finish? Yeah.
No, that's right. Yeah.
I think that the principle of what you're trying to do by use ratepayers' money to subsidise that service is wrong. And if council feels that they determined that it is right to do that, then I think I would be very keen to argue against this, what you're currently planning, and to say to council that if you believe you're going to proceed on with this, I think we should fund that from the council funds rather than taking it out of ratepayers, out of the general rate. So here in the books, clearly documented 500 plus thousand that has gone to Waitahanui. Where you take it from the rates, it gets lost in the whole system. So if that was going to happen, I think I would be pretty keen to convince our members that the right approach was to have this documented as an additional cost in your finance documents.
I'm just
Councillor Stewart.
sorry, concerned. You're saying that it's free water for Waitahanui. The connections are going to be there, but if someone connects to that water, they will be paying. So I see it. Well, one way of I'm looking at it is, because I haven't sort of, it's got to be looked at in all ways, is that it's future-proofing Waitahanui for growth and expansion, and we're getting a subsidy to help us do that. So that's one of the ways that I'm looking at how I'm going to make my decision about this, is that it is future-proofing that an area of our district that has potential, and I see that is a positive, personally.
So I could ask you how you would further develop Waitahanui. It's very restricted now. There's going to be, it would be very difficult to extend a line over the hill to Hautapi and further down. And there's not much scope to develop Waitahanui. But I agree with what you're all saying. You know, it's good to take up the funding and that the government have allocated, and to set the pipeline up. But what I'm saying is, to do that, you need to pursue you're going to have to fund that contribution, the capital contribution, and I am also saying you're probably going to have to fund a high percentage of the water rates. So you've got to look at it, and to me, if you can find the appropriate funding, then it's a go-ahead.
Councillor Jollins.
So to clarify, Tony, what you'd be saying is TRG would be in support if we could find a different funding mechanism within our current arsenal other than targeting the rates off the water scheme that are at the moment?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes, none of us feel that you know, it clearly is an area of deprivation, and you know, we do need to have support for that area, but it's not our responsibility to do that as Taupo ratepayers.
Councillor Williamson?
Yes, yeah, thanks. Yeah, through the chair. Thanks once again, Tony. This question probably more directed to Dennis, for example. If this project scheme didn't go ahead, for example, you know, in the event of not going ahead, and we're required to upgrade 37 water users down there under the current district council scheme, what would it cost, and who would it cost? Who would be paying, roughly? If you got any idea, Dennis?
I'm sorry, I don't have a cost off the top of my head, but it would be, the cost would be those 37 that are currently connected to the scheme.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just break in there? There would be a cost developing the filter process, wouldn't there? Purification.
That's correct, that would be part of the upgrade.
And you've been influenced by that in your decision of alternatives because you considered it too costly, but it's somewhat easy to not explore that quite as well if you know that you've got a grant of whatever, 1.9 million.
Councillor Boddy?
Just raised, excuse me, Tony, thank you for your comments and submission. Councillor Park used the word district funding. It's my understanding, Office of the Council will help, that it'll be an impost on the Taupo water scheme. I mean, there's 19 around the district, so it's not impost on them. The scenario has been put to me. I live in an area where there's a lot of development going on at the moment, and the question raised is, if we subsidise the scheme and say to the people, it's going past your gate, but you don't have to join, wouldn't it be sensible for a new house owner to cut the cost to put a water tank in, use their own water, and not connect on the basis they didn't have to, why should I? So I know when I lived in Bonshaw Park, we looked at joining up, $3,000 on average to join, then about $3,000 it was scrapped. So the real question is, and I understand people saying if someone buys in the future, but if you buy something in the future, you look at what's there and then you make your judgment on that. So does TRG feel that it may set a benchmark for other areas to demand the same and have it funded by others?
Oh, without doubt. I think this is what I said, setting a precedent.
Thank you.
And first off the blocks will be 5 Mile Bay, because they're going to be the first to be connected.
Councillor Park?
Oh, yes, sorry, just through the chair. When I said district, I was just talking about the big picture of things rather than, I know that it is just Taupo water scheme.
Okay, thank you very much, Tony. So in summing up, basically, you're okay with the scheme as long as the money was found elsewhere?
Yes.
I'm just thinking as an example from the investment fund, or where? Council money, or from central government?
First of all, you should look for external funding.
Yes.
And
We've got 1.9.
And there are, as I said, two possible sources. It could be local, it could be go back to government. But if you were, as council, were determined that this was to go through, and I would like to say there that it would be good to consult on that and just get the feeling, because there may be other ideas that come out of the community who really aren't very aware of this. But the funding, if it was going to come from council funds, should be allocated and clearly allocated to that role.
And paid for by those that receive the benefit, or the whole community?
Well, you're not going to get it paid for.
Well, good question. That's one of the issues that we're faced with. You know, the Taupo scheme has 470, I think, next year. The highest is 800 and something for Whakamaru. The schemes are different, but
And they will want to carry on. Every other water thing will come back to you and want to do the same thing, come out of council funds. So it's the precedent that you're setting that you have to take note of. It's a very dangerous precedent, I think. maybe it won't involve all of you, but it will catch up with.
Just on another, with your other hat on as a retired GP, do you think
A retired physician, please.
physician, sorry, would the health benefits of the good quality water? Do you see that there's a cost to that?
Yeah, I don't think anyone could argue on the, it is important. None of us would argue against that. But it's just how you get that established.
Lovely. Thanks very much,
Okay.
Dave. Good to see you. All right. How are we going? Ariel? Sorry?
I don't think Mr. Nichols is going to be able to attend.
Okay.
Today,
Okay, sure. All right. So do you want me to move that resolution? Okay. All right, it's back to item number 1. There's a suggested resolution there, a recommended resolution that submissions on the consultation document for the annual plan be received. Moved by
Move that.
Councillor Williamson. Seconded by Councillor Krasowski. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, well, so the meeting will be adjourned until, what date? 7th of June for deliberations. 10 o'clock on the 7th of June, deliberations. Councillor Truman, would you be able to give us a blessing before we go and bless us for the week ahead? Thank you.
Kia tau kia tātou katoa te atawhau tō tātou ariki me te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga I roto I te ingoa. Āmene.
Thank you, Councillor Truman. Thank you, everyone.